Welcome back. We're talking to our guest writer, director, producer, Will Brenton. And we've covered a lot of territory, but now we're going to talk about Will's next new initiative. So for that, I'm turning it over to Allison.
Thanks, Brian. Will, in previous conversations that you and I have had, you've said a couple of things that I've written down because I really like them. Firstly, I'd made a note about you've taken a lot of risks across a lot of different mediums, and I love that you've done that. Taken like television to live arena, and I've seen you kind of walk in with pitch Bibles to present concepts that you very much conceive personally. But there was something you said the other day when we spoke and we were talking about audiences. And you said it's about giving them what they want and not what you think they need. Now, on the back of that, I know that you've been very busy squirreling away while we've been on a bit of lockdown. And I'm really excited about your new venture, not least because I think it's a brilliant story world for kids to get into, but because of the way you're doing it. And I wondered if you'd like to introduce what this might be.
Bad books. Get into our bad books. So this all comes down to me having direct contact with my audience. So over the years, I've had lots of book ideas, and I've written a few of the books down. And I've decided to use lockdown as an excuse to self-publish, to get to grips with the whole self-publishing thing. And there's various reasons for this. And the main reason for me is I want to be able to, I've got stories that I want to tell. I've got stories that I think are fun. I think they're adventurous. I think they're thought-provoking. I don't expect to change the world, but I just feel that they're stories that kids are going to be interested in. And the quickest way of me putting them in front of the audience is to self-publish. And so I've gone down that route. I've formed my indie label, Bad Books, which is because I was a punk back in the day. I love Stiff Records and Rough Trade and all that. I've now got the first 6 books ready to go almost. We're just putting the final touches to them. But the key thing for me is creating a forum where, as far as the audience are concerned, as far as the kids reading the books are concerned, I'm accessible. So they could write back to me and say, I thought that was rubbish. I thought when that was rubbish, but I loved it when that happened.
Right.
You can create a dialogue about what's working in the stories, what's not working in the stories. The first series of books, you've got a screenshot there called Re-Evolution. The idea of the entire series is that in this particular series, the first series, dinosaurs never die out, and they in fact evolve to rule the world. And you end up where it's actually the T-Rexes who are the dominant species of the dinosaurs, and they've created this world that's kind of like the Roman Empire. It's very brutal. It's built on blood and violence. And it's these 3 kids find themselves transported there by accident, and it's how they survive through that and what they do. And then there's going to be a second series where they find themselves in a different version of the world where it's poisonous animals that have become the dominant species. And again, they find themselves in how humans are surviving. And for me, it's just really interesting to imagine, well, what if that was the case? What if that was the case? It's a classic what if. What if that? What if that?
Yeah.
But kids to say, well, what if this happened? Or I imagine that would happen. Or I thought that would happen. Because that, for me, is the direct engagement. It's me trying to get back to theatre, I suppose, isn't it? It's just trying to get there and say, tell me what you think. I can see a kid in a theatre. I can see what they think.
Yeah.
By physically, whether they're standing up, sitting down, smiling or crying or whatever it is they're doing.
Yeah.
I can never see that in TV. And with the greatest of respect to all the people who do really good research projects, it's not the same. It's not the same.
At least in my experience of writing interactive or immersive, there's obviously a skill and a nuance to putting that call to action in there so that your readers or your audience know that they're welcome to step forward and say something. And I know from some of the things I'd done like maybe 15 years ago where I completely messed it up, I'd left it too long to put that trigger in. So it has to be quite early, and it has to be quite upfront, I think, for your readers or even their parents to know that this is quite a unique scenario, that they actually, not just that they can tell you what they think, but that you actively want to hear what they have to say.
Yes, it's a good point. And a lot of that I'm going to find out as I go, I think, unless you can give me the secrets. Because, it's maybe different to an immersive book in the sense that it's not, and I'm not sure if you mean the same thing. They're not choosing the action as they go,
No.
but I do kind of do a little paragraph at the beginning of the book and say, look, this is what this is about. Tell me what you think.
Right.
Tell me what you'd like. Tell me what you think is exciting, you know, and that's what I hope will get the conversation going.
So in terms of book 2 to 6, because it's 6 books, right?
Yeah.
You've got the stories planned and mapped out,
Yeah.
but then you're open to twisting and changing based on what you hear back.
What it
To
would
a
be
point.
is, so we got the premise of re-evolution. What if evolution was ran differently?
Yeah.
And if I got feedback from kids saying, I think it'd be brilliant if everything was underwater, then 6 months from now, there could be a series of books where everything is underwater.
Right.
And it's that idea where, you know, on a publishing timeline, that's very quick, as we all know. You know, publishers are working 3-4 years ahead a lot of the time. I'd like to be able to getting feedback in and then be able to put that out in a series of books. Now, if this was to start to build in terms of a mailing list and the subscriptions, then I'd be able to say to an audience, here's book 1. What are we going to do in book 2?
Yeah, very
You
nice.
know,
I think
then
what's
you
brilliant,
can turn that around even quicker.
I think what's brilliant about this, from my perspective, is it gives your audience ownership, and it gives them something at stake. So basically, you're giving them the story world to play in, but then you're also giving them the opportunity to shape what takes place in that story world. And so they become a more loyal audience because they either wait. And by the way, I also think, you know, we talk about how different groups of people are not able to see themselves in media, that their voices aren't heard.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing within this context, anybody can have a voice, and suddenly characters and voices appear based on what the audience composition is and how much they want to participate. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and which stories they'll gravitate to. I mean, there's lots of story strands that I'm working up. There's the re-evolution strand. There's a strand of a completely different series about a character called Danny Dead. There's another series about characters called Ship. As these things start to emerge, audiences, will, just like they do with anything, will gravitate to different things. The other thing, though, is it's playful. You know, if I find that a character is getting a lot of positive feedback, I might deliberately do something with that character that's going to cause a bit of uproar. You know, it's that idea that there's a relationship between me and the audience, and I can, the same way that if I'm stood on stage, I can say something to an audience and either shock them or make them laugh or do whatever it is. You can do the same thing. I'll give you a parallel in TV world. I've recently pitched a soap opera where the turnaround, it's being shot weekly and goes out the following week. And it was pitched as a lockdown proposal. Again, the idea being that if you're across the conversation that's taking place about the characters in week 1, you're also then filming scenes that reflect that conversation, and it's going out in week 2. And very quickly, the audience will begin to realize that what they're talking about is actually actively being addressed in the storylines. And that turnaround, that nimble production turnaround, that means that it means that the content is alive to the audience. It's not something that's filmed 3 months previously and is all predetermined. It's something where if there's enough of a surge in opinion, it's going to affect what happens. And going back to that phrase, Ali, about, you know, it's about giving people what they want. Yeah. It's actually slightly broader than that. It's about knowing what people would like and using that to play with the storyline in a way that, you know, gets them even more involved in it, hopefully, which might not always be, oh, we want this character and this character to get married. You say, well, that might not be what happens. Right. But knowing that that's what the audience wants gives you incredible power as a storyteller.
Well, you know, this has taken place. I mean, there were some seminal adventures for this, but I can remember I worked with Tim Kring for years, it seems, and I can remember, you know, how the audience is giving feedback in real time every week. And, you know, you're talking about the television schedule, so things could be done and things could not be done, but they definitely know how the audience felt. And I think from my perspective, both Allison and I are writer producers, and all we've ever wanted, I think all any storyteller ever wants, is to feel the audience and know the audience is there with you and to establish that relationship. And I think, you know, that is what the root, I think, of fan fiction was. We're going to take the characters that you've created and we're going to start to build a story around them. So I feel like there's a certain evolution of storytelling that's happening here that maybe television is finally catching up with. And because the medium is so real time, actually.
Yeah. Well, go back to the origins of storytelling. It was people sitting around the fireplace, and those stories would have been embellished and changed and moved around depending on the group of people who are sat around listening to that particular version of the story. It's why I think there's one of these major TV series like The Blue Planet to be done about the story of the story and how the story has grown and evolved around the world. And it's no accident that we go back to the cliche of the 7 plots, but it's no accident that all cultures have got their own versions of so many of our stories, like the Cinderella story, et cetera, et cetera. It's because that's our fundamental need. But those stories have evolved through people embellishing the stories in direct reaction to the people they're telling them to. Now, in TV, we don't do that. What we do is we say, here's our story, here's our brand, and our brand is designed to hopefully attract as many kids as possible. But basically, they've got to take it as it is.
So I've got a question then, right? Because there's two very different ways then of looking at that term of interaction. So the way we're talking about it, even right back from when you were on the stage as an actor, is tuning into the audience and being responsive to what they like and maybe don't like, or their suggestions within the story or the IP. But then you've got something like interactive television, like Bandersnatch and stuff like that, when you've got the branching narratives. And in a way, it's an illusion of choice, isn't it? Because whichever one you press, it's already predefined. So it's not like an iterative process where they look at what's happened in week 1, like what you're saying, and go, right, week 2, we're going to really like mess them up. Like we're going to take Ned Stark and kill him because they think he's going to be the hero, right? So it's a branching narrative and there's an illusion of interactivity to a point. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think the idea of I've always felt about stories where you can choose the ending. I've always felt that actually that's probably not what an audience wants. What they want is to be told a good story.
I think you have both of our agreements. Yes, Alison?
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
They want to be told a good story. So knowing what the audience want and knowing how they're reacting to things doesn't mean you then just give them what they expect to happen. And it doesn't mean you allow them to tell you what's going to happen. It just means that what you write is then done with more knowledge. So you can do things that are more shocking, more surprising, or more wonderful, or warmer. Or, do you know what I mean? You just, because you're closer to the heartbeat of how your audience are reacting to everything.
Yeah, because you are truly listening, right? There's a lot of talk of storytelling, but what you're talking about right now is actually listening back to continue the story, which isn't necessarily what interactive TV does.
No, and because it can't, can it? It has to. I mean, they did it. They've done it in theatre. They did The Mystery of Edwin Drood, didn't they? Where there was 4 or 5 different endings, and you could pick which ending you want. I don't think people want to. And this may be an experience you share. One of the things my pet hates about TV at the moment is the doorway to series 2, the doorway to series 3 at the end of every series, where they'll never quite finish the story off because they want to drag you through into series 2.
Yeah,
I have to tell you, you and I share that as well. There have been a couple series that shall remain nameless right now that were great series, but petered out right at the end because it's like the writers didn't want to give you too much then. And so like 10 episodes going from 8 to 9, going from 9 to 10. Now you're really excited. You even would like a cliffhanger, but instead it just kind of peters out. And so I agree with you. I mean, like, we look at each other after it's over and we go, what the F was that? And you get really, as an audience member, you get really pissed. And the other thing I want to say that I probably agree with you on is I don't want, as an audience member, yes, I'm fine to love my characters. I'm fine to go online and talk about the characters and what's going to happen. But don't shift the responsibility for the story on me. That's why I'm tuning in.
Yeah.
And so when these choose your own ending things, and Allison's going to stop me from being too opinionated, but when these choose your own ending things come, to me, it's like, it's not genuine or authentic to the story. It gives a storyteller options, but I know that one of the things that I labor with is, what is that ending to the story? I don't want to have an alternate ending. I have alternate endings in my head, and I pick one for you. So I don't want to do that either. So when you leave me with these, it's either like, in my mind, and maybe I'm, a little more critical, but in my mind, it's like, okay, for Edmund Drood, so you want to get me to come back in the theater and spend another $100 to come back and see a different ending, which I may or may not get, depending on how the audience votes. Or now with Bandersnatch, you want me to come back and try a different ending, and so now I watch it again. No advertising there, but there are numbers to be watched. And now they're doing it with Kimmy Schmidt, which is comedy, and I'll be interested to see what that does. But to me, and I'm sorry I'm being like really opinionated here, I think it's incumbent upon the storyteller to maintain the integrity of the story world, which will, in every iteration, as I studied you and looked at your bio, whether it's arena shows, which in every iteration you do, you maintain this integrity of the story world. You open up the doors, different opening of doors, open up the doors to let the people come in and play in the story world. But they leave fulfilled. They don't leave with like, what was that? Sorry.
Yeah, and
Rant over.
No, but you're quite right. And it's a rant I've had myself many times. I feel betrayed by the writers if I don't feel they've taken the time to construct an effective ending. I feel like the idea of just rolling something over just feels like a cop out. And I understand, I get it. They want to leave a door open so you can get through into series 2, but there's nothing stopping you creating a satisfying ending as well as that.
And I have to tell you, for myself, without that satisfying ending, and I don't know if any research has been done on this, but if I don't get that satisfying ending, I'm going to forget about that show for season 2.
Yeah, well, when it's a 10-hour investment of your time to get to something where, because one of the great things about reading a mystery was always the idea of, they're going to wrap it up in a way that you don't expect. They're going to surprise you with something. And that's the joy of reading a mystery. When they take that away, then you're in the world of, well, anybody can do that then. Anybody can just throw in a bunch of red herrings and kind of just lead you down a garden path and then suddenly take it away at the end. It stops being a conceit that's satisfying.
Yeah.
So looping it, round to that idea of communicating with the audience. It's about knowing closer to where they're at, not them dictating how the story goes.
Right.
I think those two things are quite different.
Yes, I think so too, because there's something that feels genuine and authentic by you as a writer and creator saying publicly, I want to hear what you've got to say, not for an ego boost or for an ass kick, but for the point of, you want to almost like co-create in a way that these kids will read your stories and they're going to have way better ideas than you do, right? Because they're kids and they're going to just bring magic to the table. Yeah. There's something very authentic and genuine about that kind of communication loop, where I feel with interactive, click A or B stories, I never feel like I've clicked the right option. And we don't have that opportunity in our own life, do we? We don't have an opportunity to come to a crossroads and have even the moment to look back and go, oh, well, if I took that path, what would have happened? Because we're constantly being pushed and propelled through life. We don't
a really good point.
That, right? Yeah. But to be able to stop, right? And you've come to a decision point that you've made in your life as a genuine decision. And then to know you've got a few months down the line, another decision to make based on what you've done. But to have that conversation with your partner, your friends, your family, your community, there's something there that does, I think, what theme parks do really well. And it gives people shared experiences and shared ownership in a way of the decisions moving forward. And that in itself, I believe, creates great loyalty to the story world and the IP, but also to you as a writer.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to diving into it. I mean, it's not dissimilar to what happens with soap. It's just the timelines are different. Mm-hmm. Soap, there's a constant conversation about soap.
Yeah.
And the great thing about that is it is the best research they can do. I don't know of any of the soaps that spend a lot of time doing research. They can just read it every week in the magazines.
Right.
But it's a conversation in the script meetings. It's a conversation about how characters go. Quite often, characters will be brought in for a certain event, but there won't be a great detailed story arc for them for the following year and a half, because
Right.
you need to see how they land. You need to see, on so many levels, is the actor going to land on camera in the way you want them to? Is a character going to land with the audience?
Yeah.
Is the storyline going to land with the audience? There's so many factors at play.
Yes.
So they do try and respond to the audience as best they can. And
is that based on? Sorry.
No, they're on a 3 to 4 month lag in terms of filming to broadcast. So they're on another 3 to 4 months lag in terms of creating the storylines.
Yeah.
That's not dissimilar to the kind of turnaround that I'd be on.
That's really good. And in terms of like listening back to the audience from a soap perspective, is that predominantly done through the press and the magazines and social media? Like, is it really like their ear to the ground in that way?
I can't speak directly for it, and I'd make an assumption for it. It's you've got a story team in every soap, and I would imagine that's where that kind of ear to the ground takes place.
Oh, okay.
Well, as with any great story, we are coming to the end. How'd you like that, storytellers? So,
but it's not interactive. What if we press B?
There is no B.
Okay.
So, I get to control. No, I'm just kidding. We have covered a lot of territory, and we could talk about this forever. But one thing I want to point out before we go is that people can actually get that first book free, right, Will?
They can. We haven't launched yet. I don't know when this is going out, but the website will be going live in the next few weeks. And when you come on, you can see there on the landing page, you'll click through, tell me where to send the book, and you'll get the first book as an ebook free. And then hopefully you'll want to know what happens throughout the other 5 books to take you through to the end.
That's excellent. Will, thank you so much for being with us today. Thanks for sharing your approach to storytelling. I mean, we're a bit prejudiced because we agreed with everything you said. So we really couldn't argue because both being storytellers, I can just personally say that I'm glad that you're there and you're out there. And I'm also glad, just from what you've talked about, that something like Bad Books, that you're like, well, you know what? I'm not going to take the focus groups that you give me. I'm going to go direct to the audience. And I'm hoping that more and more, because just as commentary, everyone is out there telling their own stories now. And so to give them a story world that they can participate in and share a little bit of themselves in that story and have that then reflected back by you, the writer, I think that's brilliant. And maybe that's a good thing for the world today.
Well, thank you, guys. I've loved it. Really enjoyed it.
Me too. Good to see your faces. Thank you, Will.
So, well, that's our episode for today. How about that, Alison?
I thought that was great.
That's really great to have Will with us. And thank you for
round 3.
For round 3. Maybe. I mean, maybe when Bad Books is on like book 2, we'll come back and talk to Will. But that's it for now. That's our wrap. That's our closing. Hopefully it's leaving you satisfied and willing to tune in for the next episode. Thanks. Bye-bye, Alison.
Bye.